I went through a period of burnout probably about 11 or 12 years ago. I was working full time. I was running a business on the side. I knew I was eventually going to get a break, but I didn't take a holiday for 2 years. And it all just kind of came crashing in on me at the end of the year, 1 year. I really developed this strong empathy for understanding like how awful it is. It is so important to understand the impact that chronic stress has on health. It is one of the leading drivers of nearly all chronic diseases.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how urgent the need for a holistic approach to support our mental wellness is right now?
Well, I would say the World Health Organization predicts that I think by year 2030 that depression will be the leading cause of disability in the world. So whatever we're doing now, it's not enough. It's really about making those multiple changes and understanding that there is no one silver bullet for mental health.
Are you feeling drained by endless stress or the non-stop hustle? Ever stopped to think about how all that pressure might be silently wearing you down? Well, in terms of my personal experience with stress, high pressure and burnout, that has been my challenge specifically for a long time. I've always been the kind of person who works really hard, and I for a long time had difficulties in understanding the difference between when my hard work was based on a sense of commitment and a sense of responsibility, and when my hard work was coming from the wrong place, from a sense of inadequacy, from my insecurities, from my need to meet standards that sometimes have not been even very realistic. Over the years, through therapy and the Buddhism that I've now been practicing for a long time, I've gradually changed my habits in the way I see work, and I gradually learned how to distinguish between when my hard work is coming from the right place, from a healthy sense of commitment, and when I'm actually just being very unnecessarily harsh on myself. But now let's stop talking about me and let's get into today's episode, shall we? In this episode of the Zero to Fit podcast, I sit down with Sharee James, a naturopath who knows firsthand what it's like to hit the wall of burnout. Sharee works alongside doctors, nutritionists, therapists to support her clients through nutritional lifestyle changes and stress management techniques. In the episode, Sharee shares her story of breaking free from the cycle of stress and anxiety, uncovering practical strategies to rebuild balance through natural and holistic methods. She offers great insights from understanding how chronic stress impacts our energy and emotions to talking about small, actionable shifts in habits that we can make to prevent burnout. So, how can we take back control, protect our energy, and create room for our well-being and true resilience in the face of stress? Well, let's dive into today's episode with Sharee to find out. And of course, do not forget to subscribe, like, comment, engage. This will help you always be up to date with future episodes, and it will help the Zero to Fit podcast get better and better and better. And of course, do not forget to always be kind and respectful in your comments. You might potentially agree or disagree with anything that is said on this show, but please always be kind and respectful. This show covers delicate subjects, so any disrespectful comment might be triggering for some people. And of course, if at any point watching or listening you feel triggered or uncomfortable, please feel free to stop watching. And remember that we do not offer mental health advice on this show. Please consult a professional for that. The Zero to Fit podcast is a space for compelling, inspiring, and insightful content to highlight the power of looking after our mental well-being. But now let's get into today's episode with Sharee James. So tell me now about your story, how you got to doing what you do now, what motivated you, because you've been suffering from burnout yourself. Tell me about that.
Yes, so I went through a period of burnout probably about 11 or 12 years ago for a number of reasons. Part of it was I was working full time. I was running a business on the side. I knew I was eventually going to get a break, but I didn't take a holiday for 2 years. And it all just kind of came crashing in on me at the end of the year, 1 year. I remember having one panic attack that was so awful and so severe that I had to go to the emergency department of the hospital. And I felt really guilty being there because I was pretty sure it was anxiety, but I was having such severe symptoms, like a lot of vomiting and things like that, that, you know, I had to go there and get checked out. I really developed this strong empathy for understanding like how awful it is and how you would do anything to just make it stop in that moment. And thankfully, because I did have access to, you know, the tools of natural medicine with my own training and yoga and mindfulness, I personally chose to not take medication, but to take a more holistic route. And for me, that worked. And of course, you know, it's always a work in progress. I believe that, especially if you're prone to anxiety, that you should always be taking that preventative approach and taking care of your nervous system. Because a lot of us have naturally more sensitive nervous systems as well. So it's really knowing how to care for yourself in that way on a daily basis so that hopefully it doesn't get to the point where you end up with a panic attack in emergency. I do have a more sensitive nervous system, and it's something that I need to take care of on a daily basis so that I don't get to that point again. So I think it's really important to not only know how to deal with that acute anxiety, but to take that preventative approach so that it doesn't have to get to that more severe, dialed up state where you're in full-blown panic. So that's a big part of my philosophy as well with mental health.
So can you give me examples based on your typical clients of problems that came out from not taking care of our body enough or our mind enough, and then the negative consequences? Cases of burnout, for example, stress, anxiety, and the impacts on our body. Can you give me examples of the problems and the risks of not taking enough care of our body or our mind?
Is so important to understand the impact that chronic stress has on health. It is one of the leading drivers of nearly all chronic diseases. So basically, it's important to understand a little bit about the nervous system to understand how the body is affected. But if you're under chronic stress, then usually what happens is the fight or flight system of the body is chronically activated. It doesn't really switch off long enough for the nervous system to recalibrate. And this fight or flight response, because we've evolved to, you know, run from danger, whether that's a tiger historically or something like that, our nervous system is really primed to help us escape from that short-lived, short-term danger. So, you know, we have things like all the blood going to the muscles so that we can fight or flee. When we're in that state of stress, it's not important for the body to prioritize things like digestion or reproduction. So these are all important factors if in the moment, if we're running away from an acute danger. But if we are under unremitting stress and that fight or flight system is not being turned off, then we start to see issues with the body. We start to see things like chronic digestive issues or digestive conditions happening along with stress or anxiety, which is really common. We start to see things like blood sugar issues. We start to see cardiometabolic diseases, like especially from increased heart rate associated with stress. So things like high blood pressure or a propensity towards heart disease. We also start to see anxiety, depression, exhaustion, and often pain as well can be a result of long-term chronic stress, especially when you're in that exhaustion phase. So conditions like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, those kinds of things, unexplained physical pain that doesn't really have an injury or something like that at its source. And as I mentioned before, because the body doesn't really put a value on reproduction when you're running away from a tiger, if you're under that chronic stress, then hormones often start to be affected as well. So for women, we often see period problems, thyroid problems, even infertility in more extreme examples. And for men, we often start to see low testosterone. And these changes in hormones unfortunately impact mood and anxiety and the way we think and our emotions. And learning to manage stress and switch off that fight or flight system is really, really important.
Now, tell me about the link between anxiety, depression, and hormonal disorders in women.
Yeah, sure. So what a lot of people may not realize is that our female reproductive hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they're two of the main ones that fluctuate a lot throughout a woman's lifetime. They are not just acting on the reproductive system, but they act on the brain as well, and even have impacts on neurotransmitters. So estrogen, for example, on serotonin, and progesterone with GABA, which is one of our calming neurotransmitters. So if we think of the times when a woman's hormones are fluctuating the most, so think of puberty, pregnancy, premenstrually or ovulation, after having a baby, or perimenopause, this is often when we know that can be a propensity towards mental health issues. So for some women, it's because of these hormones fluctuating or being imbalanced. And for other women, especially women who suffer from a condition called PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, this is where you get severe depression or mood symptoms before your period, not just run-of-the-mill low mood with PMS, but where it's really affecting a woman's day-to-day functioning. For some women, they actually have a genetic sensitivity, even if the hormones are imbalanced, but whenever those hormones change, it can really affect their mental health. Perimenopause as well is another huge one. Two of the main symptoms that I see the most in perimenopausal women are anxiety, really quite severe anxiety, and sleep issues. And this is partly due to those fluctuating hormones. And then, of course, we all know about postpartum depression. Postpartum anxiety is also just as common, if not more common. So there is this real connection between a woman's hormones and her mental health as well.
So what is the connection between anxiety, depression, and the lower level of cortisol that these things can cause, which then can even cause mobility problems?
So cortisol is one of our stress hormones. And when I spoke about the fight or flight branch of the nervous system before, cortisol is one of the stress hormones that is also involved in that. So cortisol, when you're anxious, usually cortisol is high, excessively high, which is why you get that kind of agitated kind of feeling with anxiety. But if you are under that kind of extreme stress or anxiety for a long time, what happens is the body tries to minimize the damage of having too high cortisol in the body. So for a period of time, you'll be in a state where it's just fluctuating up and down. This is called the adaptation phase. And this is where you can see symptoms like being really tired but wired, having anxiety but also feeling really down and lethargic. It's this kind of yo-yoing of symptoms. And then after that phase, what can happen is the brain is really trying to protect the body from the excess cortisol now, and will put the brakes on it so that you're not secreting much cortisol at all. And this is where we see more of that really lower energy, depression, exhaustion, what we would call like true burnout. Often characteristic with that low cortisol. And because cortisol is also an anti-inflammatory in the body, if your brain is now suppressing it, we often see this widespread inflammation, pain, mobility issues that aren't linked to a physical injury or anything like that. And it's simply due to this low cortisol happening, basically. What the latest evidence has really shown is that multiple small changes in several areas is actually more effective than just making one or two big changes. So what I mean by that, making a few small changes in things like rest, diet, movement, mindfulness, whatever it is, versus just doing medication or just going down the therapy route is actually more effective. And it's not about, doing natural versus not natural. It's really about taking that holistic approach in terms of looking at the whole person and looking at the unique underlying causes of that person's symptoms, which vary from one person to the next. Even though they may have the same symptoms, the path that got them there can be made up of all sorts of things: physical factors, mental and emotional factors, social, environmental, spiritual. All of these things have to be taken into account in order to formulate a treatment plan that's actually going to address those root causes. So for a lot of my clients, this is working alongside medication and therapy. There's so much more research now on the gut-brain connection, on the impact of diet and nutrition on mental health, mindfulness. There's been so much research in the last few decades. So it's slowly getting there, but in terms of the average Joe that's suffering from anxiety or depression, they tend to go and see their GP as the first port of call, which is fine, but usually they're offered medication or therapy or maybe both. And the fact that we have these ridiculous numbers, this ridiculous prevalence of anxiety and depression right now is showing that anxiety and depression is still growing at a phenomenal rate. So it's not cutting it. We need to take that holistic approach. And this is where I really want to see the direction of mental health treatment going in the future, because it's just so important to treat that individual and to find their underlying root causes of their symptoms.
Scale from 1 to 10, how urgent the need for a holistic approach to support our mental wellness is right now?
Well, I would say 10, because people are struggling. The World Health Organization predicts that I think by year 2030 that depression will be the leading cause of disability in the world. So whatever we're doing now, it's not enough. And this prediction from the World Health Organization was before COVID, and obviously we all know that mental health has worsened a lot since the pandemic. So I think it's absolutely crucial if we want those long-term solutions, instead of just, a pill for an ill and medicating people without also looking at everything else that is going on as well.
Well, I am one of those people who struggled during the pandemic with anxiety and panic attacks. And it is by combining many different ways with a holistic approach, looking after myself, that I could come out of it. So now, can you give me a breakdown of the methods you use with your typical clients who come to you with a burnout, for example, or a high level of anxiety and panic? Where do you start from? What do you do?
Yeah, so the first port of call, if you want to be able to uncover the root causes behind someone's symptoms, is to be able to take a really thorough assessment. So I have a couple of assessments that I use, but one of the main ones is derived from a modality called PI therapy, personalized integrative therapy. This was actually developed by an Australian clinical psychologist and researcher here. And so this really assesses, it's quite a long questionnaire, and it really assesses a client's symptoms looking through the lens of all different areas. So biological and medical, social, spiritual, diet, movement, cognitive, like what are their thought processes like, emotions, daily habits, lifestyle. So by the end of this assessment, it gives the practitioner a really clear blueprint of where this particular person needs to start focusing on. We usually work together on where the person would like to begin and with what. Definitely naturopathic medicine in for the physical. I often refer my clients for a whole battery of standard tests with their GP to look for any hidden physical drivers like inflammation or nutrient deficiencies. Sometimes I refer to specialist testing through naturopath, nutritionists, integrative doctors. We can use private labs that do some more specialized testing. So we might look at more thorough gut testing, for example, or there's a whole range of other tests. And then we tend to use things like supplements, personalized diet, herbal medicine to address those issues. But then we're also working with things like improving someone's sleep, if that's an issue, and their sleep hygiene, what they're doing before bed, or helping them bring some movement back in, or it could be developing tools for emotional balance. It could be developing a short, simple mindfulness or restorative yoga practice to regulate their nervous system. So I really draw from all of these realms, changing daily habits, changing lifestyle, and it really is a completely customized approach for each person, because that's what each person really needs. And that's what I love as a practitioner, because even though I'm seeing the same types of conditions, it's a completely different journey for every single person.
So do you have one or two success stories from your clients of how they, through holistic approach, overcame their struggles with their mental and physical health?
So one client was a lady who came to me with depression that seemed to just arise out of the blue. And, after doing the assessment, she seemed to have on the surface a pretty happy lifestyle. She loved her job. She was in a committed partnership. She had great friends. Didn't have a history of trauma or difficult childhood, anything like that. But this depression had kind of come out of the blue and had gotten worse. And she also had just a few non-specific gut issues like bloating, starting to get heartburn. And around the time the depression started, I remember she'd had a few courses of antibiotics for a chest infection. And so I thought maybe there's an issue here with the microbiome in the gut, because antibiotics can affect that. Obviously, that can also affect mental health. So I suggested we do a test that can test the microbiome for imbalance and too much bad bacteria in the gut. Sometimes this is called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And she did the test and it was off the charts bad. In fact, I was surprised she didn't have more gut symptoms. So we started her on a protocol to clear that up and bring the gut back into balance. And within 6 weeks, not only her gut symptoms had improved, but her mood had completely lifted and the depression had gone. So I'm definitely not saying this is the case for all depression, but for this particular lady, there was a direct link between her gut health and her mood. So that was a really interesting case. And then another lady I had recently, she had a combination of anxiety, depression, brain fog. She had some hormonal issues like severe mood changes with her period and with ovulation, and she had a few gut symptoms as well. And then when I sent her off just for some standard testing with her GP, and I always get everyone to do a liver function test, she came up with a condition called Gilbert syndrome, which is technically, if you have that, the doctor will tell you it's a benign condition, because it's just a hereditary condition where your body doesn't metabolize things the same way as other people. And there's no serious side effects to it, but something that it does do is it causes, often in women, an imbalance of estrogen, gut issues, and it can also block or prevent the uptake of certain nutrients that you need for your neurotransmitters. So we often see that trifecta of mental health issues, hormonal imbalance, and gut issues when there's Gilbert syndrome. Thankfully, there's a supplement that really helps to kind of support this dysfunction in metabolism. So we got her on that supplement, and straight away her hormonal symptoms and gut symptoms started improving first. And then after that, mood and anxiety started to improve as well, because it was linked to this very clear condition that unfortunately there wasn't much orthodox medicine could offer for.
So now, as we do with every episode, if you had to give one final takeaway for everybody to remember, what would that be?
Or making those small changes across multiple areas is so powerful for mental health. So look at your life, look at your health from a holistic point of view. Look at your diet, your sleep, your movement, your social connections. Look at everything from that holistic viewpoint. Making those small changes across several areas in your life with your health is actually more effective and more beneficial than just trying just one thing. So it's really about making those multiple changes and understanding that there is no one silver bullet for mental health.
Thank you so much, Sharee, for being with us.
Thank you so much, Val, for having me.
Okay, so this was our episode with Sharee James. I hope you felt inspired by it. And of course, you can find Sharee's links in the episode description down below. And of course, do not forget to subscribe, like, comment, engage. This will help you always be up to date with the episodes, and it will help the podcast get better and better and better. I have finished for today, and remember that your difficulties do not define you.